programs. Yes, yes. And the CSL music team and house band, thank you for that beautiful solo in there, Kirby and Matt and Jonathan and Brad. Woo! So where else can you go on Sunday morning and get a little meditative chant and some reggae and some gospel and then some jazz all in the same service? Yeah, right? So my name is Tracy Brown, and I am so delighted to introduce to some and present to others our friend and colleague, Michael Brundy. So blessed every time he agrees to speak in our community. And if this is your first time being exposed to him, I just want to give you a little bit of background about him. Here in the Centers for Spiritual Living organization and the CSLDallas community, of course, we know you don't have to be a licensed spiritual director or minister to speak, and he recognizes that he has a message that he brings forward both in word and in action. And you don't have to be a practitioner to practice these principles, and Michael is one of the people who we have seen over the years practice the principles in all aspects of his life. For example, in his career, he likes to tell you that, and he's very proud of having perfect attendance in the workplace for more than 30 years. But I would tell you that the things he doesn't often say is that in practicing the principles in the way he lives his life, he went from an individual contributor to an individual leader to a team leader to a manager. And yes, that was because of professional skill and expertise and education, but also from practicing showing up in the ways that we teach in science of mind. And not only was he a leader in his individual team, but he was a leader nationally of the Black Employee Network and was recognized by leaders at all levels as someone who could bring people together. In the community, Michael is really well known as a professional speaker and storyteller and is very involved in storytelling events. And how many of you have heard him tell stories? You're going to hear him tell at least one story today because he always does, and he is an excellent example of that. And also in the community, he is known for 50 years of leadership in his fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. So let's see if there's anything else. He's grinning back here like, shut up, Tracy. He's a fabulous son and brother and friend, and I should have asked him first, but it's too late now. I want you all to welcome his mother into our presence today. Mama Brundy, would you please stand up? So I invite you to join me in welcoming who? Michael. Say it again. Michael. One more time. I can't hear the people online. Michael J. Brundy.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy Brown. I like saying Dr. Tracy Brown. I'm really lucky and blessed today, one, because you just heard that my mom's in the audience. Along with her is my grandson, too, and that's kind of special to have both of them. I've got a couple of fraternity brothers here also, so if you guys see some tall, good-looking black men that you're not used to seeing around here, those three guys, those are my frat brothers. So they're here, too. So glad that they're here, and one other thing, too, before I get started. We always get a chance as the speakers to say what kind of music we want before we speak, and I just wanted to hear Candy sing. I don't know if the song had anything to do with what I have to say or anything else. I just want to hear Candy sing. So those of you who don't know, she's a darn good professional singer. She has a new music video that just came out on July 15th. I encourage you to go to YouTube, go to her Facebook page, find it and see it, as well as the rest of the band. Especially for the guys who don't know, my brothers who don't know, we've got a heck of a band here. Not only Kirby, who's the leader, and Brad on the piano, but we've got the best jazz player, the best musician in Dallas, Jonathan, who plays bass. We've got a drummer who's a Grammy-winning winner, and that's Matt. So if you come here for nothing else, come here for the music, because you can't get better music without a 2-drink minimum anywhere else. So this is a cool thing. So guys, normally you know that we would have Reverend Peacher, Reverend Karen, or Dr. Tracy up here speaking, and it's a little different when you get me to speak. You know, with Dr. Peacher, you get a whole bunch of that, do you see, and she's a good teacher. And Reverend Karen's always, be love, and Tracy, what's mine to do? And I don't look near as good as any of them, and I don't have the same kind of message. Mine's a lot different, so we're radically inclusive and all that, so we do things different around here. So Reverend Peacher asked me to speak, and when she asked me to speak, it happened to be a really, really good time in my life. I was doing a lot of speaking, I was doing a lot of storytelling, and she asked me if I could come and speak on July 24th. She was going to be out of town. And you know, I immediately, of course, said yes, because anybody gets a chance to come speak at CSL. It's one of the best places for New Thought people to come speak, so I wanted to speak. But then when she asked me, well, what would the topic be? Well, I just said off the top of my head, the difference is attitude. That's something that I had talked about before. It wasn't going to be hard. It wasn't going to be difficult. I figured I'd just look at a couple of videos that I did in the past, check out some recordings, read some notes, and get up there and wing it, and it would all be cool. And then something happened. I had that sacred disruption that we've been focusing on all month. And that, for me, that sacred disruption looked like this. It was two things. First, that's not who I am. I don't have to do anything. I'm just not that kind of person. So I know when I'm going to speak, when I'm going to tell stories, I'm going to do my best. And that means I might have to work at it, but I'm not just going to go wing it. That's just not who I am. So I had to change that. Then I went and actually listened to some of the recordings and looked at some of the videos that I had made in the past. And you know what? I was pretty damn good. And I really wasn't sure if I could replicate that. So I got a little scared then. And when you get scared and when you don't know what to do, then I've learned that it's really important that you sit with the question. I heard that if you sit with the question, then the answer will appear. So I just sat with the question. And the question was, okay, how does attitude make a difference in my life? How can attitude make a difference in other people's lives? When we have inflation and wars and social injustice and all kinds of other things going on, how can we then, you know, Ryan's back there trying to tell me something, so I'm going to pause and make sure I know what he's trying to tell me. Is this what you want me to do? You want me to get the clicker? That's it. That's it. That's it. I'm going to tell you guys far in advance, okay? Me and this clicker, we do not get along. I've got this clicker here just for you guys, okay? It's not for me, it's for you. And I know Tracy reminded me that some people are visual, so it's really important to have some visual. And I know that some of y'all like slides, so I've got some slides and some visual stuff just for you folks, okay? Not for me. So thank you, Ryan. Now, where was I? So what I know is that our attitude makes a difference. So when I went inside to ask that question, that's what kept coming back to me, that our attitude makes a difference. Whether we're dealing with global problems like the environment or climate change, whether we're dealing with social injustice and police brutality, whether we're dealing with, you know, the kids just aren't acting right today. Whatever those things are, the difference is our attitude. And our attitude is like our vision. It's the way that we see ourselves. It's the way that we see others. It's the way that we see our world. And I just think that we're much better off when we see our world with a positive attitude. You know, when you look on the bright side of life, when you see the glass as being half full versus half empty, that just seems to make a lot more sense to me. You know, W. Clement Stone says it like this. He says there's very little difference in people, but that little difference makes a big difference. And that little difference is their attitude. And the big difference is whether it's positive or negative. It just works out better if you have a positive attitude and look on the bright side of life. Why wouldn't you? When you do that, that's when you begin to see God in everything. You begin to see the good in everything when you look on the bright side of life. I heard this story about this minister who always was positive, always had something positive to say, always, no matter what was going on, always had a positive prayer. And on this particular Sunday, it wasn't a day like today where it's hot and bright and sunny and all that. It was a miserable day. I mean, a miserable day. Rainy, cloudy, dark, and cold. You know, that bone-chilling kind of cold, that kind of day. Just a miserable day. And one of those less positive, cynical congregants, they said, I wonder what the Rev is going to say about today. What's the Rev going to possibly say that's so positive about today, this miserable day? And the Rev got up and started the service, and he started with his normal prayer, and he said, Lord, thank you for this miserable day, the rain, the cold, and all. And thank you even more that it's a rarity, and we won't have another one like this tomorrow. That darn pastor had found a way to find something positive even about that. You know, we can do that. We can find something positive about any situation. And you know what? It's contagious. Your attitude is contagious. It rubs off on other people. You know it because you can walk in a room and you can feel when things are going bad or going good, because we have that spirit that goes between us back and forth. It just vibrates. There are these two girls who were on this job. Now, this may be a job like some of you guys have. They had a job and everything on the job was bad. I mean, the administration up top, they didn't give a darn about the workers. They didn't care at all. The managers didn't know the job. They couldn't supervise well. Her fellow employees, they were always backbiting. They were always talking about each other. It was just a bad place to work. Even the customers were negative and nasty. There was nothing good about this place to work. You know, I've worked in some places like that, and that's what it was like with these girls. It was just a pitiful place to work. So they quit the job. But the day before they quit, they said they were going to have a prank on the rest of the employees. Now, it was a strange prank to me, but this is what they came up with. They said that they were going to be positive all day long on their last day. They were just going to be as positive as they could be. They were going to encourage other people. They were going to smile at all their coworkers. They were going to be, helpful. They were going to just be positive. And that's just what they did. When anybody would start to gripe or gossip, they wouldn't have nothing to do with that. They said something positive. They smiled. They were just the light of the world. And you know what? At the end of the day, they looked around and said, everything had changed. It wasn't even the same workplace. Now it was a more positive workplace. The fellow employees seemed to be cool. Everything seemed to work out just because they had changed their attitude. And of course, they decided, well, maybe we won't quit today. We'll keep the job. Because they learned that it's our attitude, what we bring to the table, that determines whether we're having a good time or not, whether things are going well or not, whether things are going bad or not. Our attitude is something that's inside of us. I call it that spirit that works inside of us. You know, whether we're enthusiastic or passionate, that's the spirit. Enthusiasm means, in Greek, it means entheos. It means God within. So when you're being enthusiastic, when you're being passionate, when you're being rah, 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 that's God within expressing itself, coming out. That's how you can keep that positive attitude, by listening to that, by reacting to that, and having a positive attitude. Now for me, I've got my own special way of keeping my attitude. And I've used it for decades now. And I know that it works because it's worked for me and it's worked for other people. I call it my 4D method. Now, my 4D method is pretty simple. I've got a cute little name for it. I call it the D-attitudes. You like that? The D-attitudes. I made that one up myself, the D-attitudes, okay? Now, the D-attitudes are really pretty simple. It's simply decide, declare, do, and delight, okay? Decide, declare, do, and delight. Now, y'all say it with me, okay? Decide, declare, do, and delight, okay? And one more time. Decide, declare, do, and delight, okay? Now, there it is for those of you who are visual, okay? You can take your pictures now and all decide, declare, do, and delight, okay? Now, I think that, first of all, if you've got stuff going on bad in your life, if you're under stress or things are negative, the first thing you've got to do is decide what the heck is causing you those problems. You've got to decide what's the cause of your stress before you can change anything. If you don't know what the problem is, how are you going to address it? You've got to make a decision that this is what it is and this is what I'm trying to work on. You know, the other thing is that if you had a goal or there's something that you want to do in your life, you've got to make a decision. You've got to decide what it is that you're going to do. Everything starts with a decision about how we're going to proceed, the attitude that we're going to have. So the first thing you must do is make a decision. Now the second D is for declarations. Now, this is a personal one for me because I think that words have power. Our words reflect our thoughts, and our thoughts reflect our feelings, and that's that spirit inside of us. So you got to be careful about the words that you use. So you got to be careful about those declarations that you make. You know, declarations are like when you tell everybody about what you're going to do. You know, when you say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach this goal, or I'm going to do whatever. Now, some people will tell you that when you set a goal, if you want to be successful, well, don't go make declarations. Don't go tell everybody about it because the haters will come out and they'll start hating on you, and that'll make you hard to accomplish your goal. I look at it a little bit different. I say make public declarations, you know. Tell other people what your goals are, what your dreams are, what you aspire to do. Because if you do that, a couple of things happen. First, you let people know how they can help you. How can they help you if they don't know what the heck you're doing, what your goals and dreams are? If I tell you what I'm about, now I can get some help, right? The other thing is that, you know, I try to give myself an opportunity to win. You know, I try to make it easy. So I know if I make public declarations, if I tell my friends I'm going to do something, I got the kind of friends that are going to hold me to it. I'm sure you got the same kind of friends. If you tell your friends that you're going to lose weight and they see you eating a donut, what they're going to do? They're going to get all on you, right? They're going to keep you on the path. If you tell your friend, hey, you know, I'm cleaning up the house, I'm going to be more organized, and they come over to your house and everything's all junky and messy, whoa, they're going to get in your stuff, right? So I think if you make public declarations, then you get a chance to get that extra support. People will tell you how they can help you, and they will tell you when you're getting off track. So make declarations. Now, the third D is for doing the work. See, you can have all the decisions, make all the declarations that you want. You know, I've tried that stuff where you visualize and measurize and try to, you know, make your dream appear. That stuff don't work. What works is work. You got to put forth the work. That's why the third D is for doing. You've got to take action. Even around here, we say you treat and you move your feet. You can't just expect things just to happen for you. You've got to do the work. But if you do the work, then things will work out for you. I'm sure of that. I know if you take actions, things will work. It's a whole lot better than just grumbling about how bad things are, or I wish inflation would go away, or oh, that bad president, or whatever it might be. Why would you want to spend your time grumbling and being negative? Because that's not going to do anything. What's going to work is if you take action and you work. Now, I've got a friend in the men's circle. Now, this is going to be a shameless plug for the men's circle. Any of you guys Jeff can tell you about our men's circle. It's a great group. Well, I've got a friend in the men's circle named Carl Generous. And Carl Generous is right now in the swimming pool wishing that he was here. Okay? But his wife is going to go home and tell him how he's talking about him. See, Carl's one of those who he really gets passionate about society, about things that are going on, politics, social things, social issues, whatever. I mean, he gets excited about that stuff. He's a little bit older than me, and he's trying to learn his way through some things, but he gets passionate when he gets upset about something. But he doesn't just wallow around and just be upset. He takes action. I've seen it. He goes, talks to his friends who may or may not agree with him. He'll put up signs in his yard saying Black Lives Matter. He does those kinds of things. He actually takes action. He writes letters to the editor, to the newspaper, and says this stuff is not right. That's a whole lot better than just sitting around grumbling and complaining about how bad things are. Carl, my friend, he takes action. Now, I told Carl that when I go jogging, I see about a half dozen Confederate flags when I go jogging in my neighborhood all the time. And when I told Carl that, Carl was appalled. I mean, he got really upset. Carl called me the next day. He said, Michael, I just don't understand about these flags. He said, now, I can't run with you because I'm too old to run. He said, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bunch of my friends, and we're going to all get together, and we're going to come out there, and we're going to support you, and we're going to march around the neighborhood in front of all those Confederate flags and let them people know that we're not down with that Confederate stuff. You know, that's what he was going to do for me. He was going to go get a bunch of people, come to my neighborhood, and march and support me with all those Confederate flags. Now, that's what you call taking action. That's like doing something about it instead of just griping about it. Now, I didn't let Carl come out to my house and do that stuff. I ain't crazy. You know, once Carl leaves, I still got to live with my neighbors. So I had to find a much better way to deal with that than that. But I so appreciated that he was willing to do that kind of thing for me. You know, he was willing to take action. And if things aren't going your way, then you've got to take some kind of action. I've got another friend from the men's circle who, he's not the first one that, you know, that said this, but Randy Craig has a way of saying things in such a poignant way that it kind of sticks with you. And we were having a discussion about just how bad the world was and how much we, you know, what could we change? How can little bitty me make a difference with climate change? How can I impact the environment? How can I have an impact and do something about those things? And Randy just said, you know, it all starts with us. We change ourselves. That's how we change the world. If you want peace, then you need to be peaceful. So you just do those things. You can't eat an elephant all in one bite. You do your part. You do a little piece at a time. So if you have a problem with the environment, then you should be investing in solar panels. If you have a problem with the environment, then maybe you should be not throwing trash out the windows. You know, if you want to see that change, then you have to be that change. And we can make changes in society. We complain about inflation, we complain about the environment, we complain about the social injustice in the world, but we can make changes. I've seen changes happen in my own life. You know, there was a time when we would have on the news smog alerts for cities like LA and New York, and we would talk about how bad the smog was in those towns. There was a time when the Ohio River would catch on fire, Lake Erie would catch on fire, because we were that bad with pollution. We don't do that anymore. It used to be a part of the rites of passage for young boys to go out and burn the trash every evening. We don't do that anymore. We've decided as individuals and we've decided collectively that we're going to make a change. And we can do that. And to me, that's a good example of what we can do in all areas of life if we want to make a change. We start with ourselves. We do the little bit that we can, and that'll be contagious. And before you know it, the world would have changed. And when you make those changes, when you accomplish those goals, when you get that stuff done, that's when you get to the fourth D. And the fourth D is just to simply delight. You know, pat yourself on the back, say, oh, I did it, blah, blah, blah. You know, most folks don't do that. You know, they go from one problem to the next problem. They don't take the time to acknowledge the fact that, you know, hey, I made it. I accomplished this goal. I did what I set out to do. And when you do that, when you just go from one problem to the next, you get kind of burnt out. Because the reality is you're either in a problem, you just left a problem, or you're headed for another problem. You know, there's always going to be some problems. But you need to take that time where you learn, what did I learn that time? What could I have done differently? How can I change that? As well as, hey, I did a good job. You need to take that break so that you're ready for the next problem. That's the 4D method. Delight, okay? So the 4 Ds are decide, right? Declare, do, and delight. Now, for those of you who stuck with me on that one, you get the bonus, okay? There's a bonus one, okay? A bonus D. Now, this is my superpower, okay? And most folks don't. If you just did this, you could do away with all the other ones. It's just a matter of having discipline. You know, discipline is when you don't want to do it. You get up and do it anyway. You know, discipline is when you delay gratification. You don't get it right now, but you're going to get it later. You know, discipline for me is getting up and running every morning because I know that I'm going to feel better because I ran. And you know, for me, it is just as difficult to get up and run as it is for anybody else. I hate to get out of bed in the morning when the sheets are nice and warm. But I know that I'm going to feel better about myself at the end of the day if I know that I've done that. So that's a part of my discipline. You know, so if you really want things to go well in your life, you know, practice that 4th D, that discipline, okay? Now, for some of you guys, That's going to be difficult to keep all these D's in your head. You know, the 4D method and the bonus D, okay? Well, there's even a simpler way than that, okay? If you've got a problem, things are not going your way, you got a negative attitude, then just simply be grateful. Just practice a little gratitude, okay? If you're not grateful for what you already have, it's hard for you to get more any darn way. So just be grateful. You know, now, some of you I know are saying, well, I don't have a lot to be grateful for. Well, I've got some help for those of you like that. If you don't have anything to be grateful for, then just hold your breath for about 60 seconds. Something will come to you, okay? Just hold your breath for a little while. You'll figure out something that you can be grateful for, okay? You'll be grateful for breathing. You know, right now, this morning, there are people on ventilators who would be glad to be able to breathe. There are people with pneumonia who are sick or have sinus problems or whatever else who would be glad to be able to breathe. So when you practice being grateful, then you start to see, well, you know, things ain't all that bad. You know, because I'm grateful that I can walk, that I can talk, that I can breathe, that I can eat, that things are going my way. Now, along with gratitude and all that, I also practice meditating and praying. Meditating is when I'm listening to God, and praying is when I'm talking to God. Now, really, I'm listening to myself and I'm talking to myself, but it's the same kind of thing to me. But that works. And on top of that, just self-development, trying to improve yourself. You want to have a good attitude? Make yourself better. Read more, research more, learn more, develop yourself. But the most important thing that I know that can affect your attitude, now, and I'll tell you how I learned this. I learned this from some old folks, some old ladies, okay? When I retired, it just didn't dawn on me that I was going to be in my 60s, and my parents and old folks were going to be in their 80s, and now I was going to have to take care of them. I never thought about that. But that's what ends up happening. I just didn't think that that was going to be the case. But from doing that and taking care of older relatives, what I learned was that the most important thing going is your health. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what titles you may have. If you don't have your health, none of that stuff will matter. None of those 4Ds, none of that gratitude stuff will matter when you are sick and feeling bad. It is very hard to have a positive attitude when anything hurts. So take care of your health. Nothing is more important, okay? Nothing. Now, recently, this whole attitude thing and keeping a positive attitude, it's really got to be tough over the last 2 or 3 years because we've got COVID going on, we got this Ukraine war going on, we got police brutality and all kinds of social issues, things going on, and it can be extremely difficult in this kind of environment to stay positive. Well, what I do is I look to history, and I've done a lot of studying over the last 3 years because we've been in this pandemic, looking at history, trying to say, well, how did people deal with this stuff in the past? You know, what did other people do? Are we the first ones to go through pandemics, through wars? What did they do? You know, and then I look at people I know, relatives, folks that I'm close to, because I can relate to them. How did they get through challenges? How did they handle them? One of my heroes is my grandmother. My grandmother, my mother's mother. My grandmother, well, we call her Mama Jessie, okay? Mama Jessie was born February 14th, slightly after midnight in 1900, just minutes after her twin sister had been born on February 13th, prior to midnight. They had the distinction of being identical twins with different birthdays. And they called themselves Essie and Jessie. 1900. Now, in 1900, the life expectancy for any American was barely 46 years, okay? For a black woman, maybe 38 in 1900. Now, when they were born, you can just about track history with their lives, okay? So when they were born in 1900, the country had just really got into Jim Crow. We had decided, hey, this is how it's going to be, separate but equal, okay? Even the Supreme Court had agreed, okay, in 1896. So 4 years later, when they're born, that's the world that they're born in, okay? By the time they get out of high school, the country's into World War I, and we had never been in a world war. So that was devastating for the population. We were in World War I. When they turned 18, the country was in the midst of the Spanish flu, the big epidemic then. They were 18 years old. When they turned 20, oh, it was the roaring 20s for a lot of folks, and they were having a lot of good times. But for black folks, it wasn't so roaring. In the 1920s, that's when we had the red hot summers. That's when Tulsa was burned. That's when Rosewood was burned. That's when black people were lynched. It wasn't a great time for my grandmother and my aunt. In the 30s, even before the 30s, when they turned 29, they saw the worst day in America when the stock markets crashed. They spent their 30s raising children during the Depression. And by the time they hit their 40s, what was not supposed to ever happen again was happening. We were into World War II. Now, that wasn't even supposed to happen. And there it is all over again. In 1942, Aunt Essie died. Now, I didn't know Aunt Essie, okay? But I heard stories about Aunt Essie. And they say she was a little bit faster than Mama Jessie. You know, she was a little bit, you know, she had a good time. She drank a little bit, she smoked a little bit, she partied a little bit. And at 42, she was dead. And her identical twin would live another 57 years. Because she never drove a car, and she always walked, and she always ate healthy, and she was always involved in church, and she always had that positive attitude. That was in the 40s, okay? By 1950, my grandmother was going through the Korean War, and anytime there was a war in our family, it's important because I come from a military family, and it means a father, a brother, a grandfather, an uncle, or a son, or somebody has to go to war. That's what the 50s were like for my grandmother. By the 1960s, my grandmother was finally getting the chance to see some civil rights come apart, okay? But she also was seeing a time when we assassinated leaders. You know, we don't do that much anymore, but we used to do that. You know, we have a president that we didn't like, we find somebody that would shoot him. That's the environment that my grandmother lived in the 60s. Now, in 1965, when my grandmother was retirement age, 65. Now, I'm not to say that she didn't vote before that, but she was 65 before it was guaranteed that she had the right to vote. Okay? When she turned 70, she started to see World Watergate. She saw Vietnam. She saw the peace demonstrations. By the time she got to be 80, she had seen the right conservative revolution come all the way across the country and see Ronald Reagan, who she had known as an actor all of her life, get elected to be president. She lived long enough still to see the Clintons, to see the Bushes, all those become president. And she got a chance to see her friend, Colin Powell, become Secretary of State, as well as leading all the nation's armies in the war. Now, my grandmother during that same time, now she didn't just complain and just accept her spot either. My grandmother went from being a domestic servant and cleaning up other people's houses and cooking for other people to having her own catering business and being an independent businesswoman herself. She ended up having a business where she ended up serving generals, serving presidents, okay? Someone who had been a domestic worker. My grandmother lived to be 2 months short of 98. She lived to be 97 years old. But that was a result of that good living. And it may or may not be true, because who knows why people live or die. But I'd like to think that if I model my life after my grandmother's versus Aunt Essie's, I might get a chance to live a little bit longer. And so that's one of my examples. So when I have a bad attitude, looking at the people who've come before me and see how they've handled tough times, looking at the country that's been changing all this time and how we've handled that, when I look at those things, then I can find a way to be positive. Because if they can do it, if they can handle it, I'm sure I can handle it. It's just a matter of choice, me choosing to have a more positive attitude. I've got one more I want to tell you about. I've got this white friend who, this guy, he really, really loves the country, and he's really, really concerned about just how bad things are in the country and about whether, he wasn't a Donald Trump fan, and he thinks that the country's going to hell in the handbasket and all that, and he just thinks that things are just so, so bad. And I go back and study history, and I tell him, you know, well, at least up until January 6th, you know, we've had some bad presidents, and you couldn't even say President Trump was the worst one. I don't know about this January 6th stuff. But, you know, we had 12 presidents who were slave owners. Hear me? 12. Out of the first 12, all but the Adams were slave owners. So what I told him is that you think living under Obama, under Trump, under Biden is bad? I come from a people who lived under presidents who endorsed, encouraged slavery. I come from a people who endured lynching. From the end of the Civil War to when I was born, a black man was lynched in America every other day. Every other day. And I come from a people who deal with a Congress that wouldn't even make it a law not to lynch people. That's the kind of folks I come from. That's the kind of world that we come from. Now, if they can be positive through all of that and handle all of those kinds of things, then what am I griping about? They've proved that we can handle tough times. They've proved that we can make changes. They've showed us the way. And it begins with our attitude. How we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see our world. It's all about our attitude, okay? Now, I told you guys I was bad on these videos. This is for some of you other folks, okay? I know how church is, and this is a little bit different church for some folks, and if I'm going to be politically correct and say it the right way, house of worship is different. Well, some of you guys need to see some Bible verses, so this is just for y'all. It ain't for me, it's just for y'all. But I want you to know that it's not just positive speaking that I'm giving, not just a motivational talk. I don't care what religious group you go to or where you go, you'll find that everybody believes that it's important to have a positive attitude. Everybody believes that that's the way that you should live. You can find it in the Bible, the Torah, any of those books. That's what they will tell you. And they will tell you that we have a choice. We have a choice in the attitude that we're going to display that day. So one last quote, and you guys can read this along with me. But the longer that I've lived, the more I realize the impact that attitude has on life. Attitude to me is more important than the facts. It's more important than the past. It's more important than circumstances. Education, more important than money. It's more important than circumstances, successes, or failure. It's more important than what other people think, say, or do. You know, it's something that can make or break a company, it can make or break a church, it can make or break a home. Your attitude, it can make or break you. The remarkable thing, though, is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude that we would choose to embrace for that day. We cannot change the past, we cannot change the inevitable, we can't change the fact that people are going to act in a certain way. The only thing we can do is play the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is only 10% what happens to me, but it's 90% of how I choose to react to it. And so it is with you. You are in charge of your attitude. And if you have a problem with your attitude, remember, be grateful, meditate and pray, improve on yourself, and keep track of your health. Remember the 4 Ds, decide, declare, do, and delight. And the bonus is about discipline. If you do all of those kinds of things, and remember a little bit of history, I think that you can change your attitude. I think that you can change other people, you can change the world, you can change yourself. The difference is all about your attitude. So remember this, folks, that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Because in life, we will always be faced with a series of God-ordained opportunities, brilliantly disguised as problems and challenges. The difference will be your attitude. Thanks, folks. Have a great day.